Hello, I'm Mrs. Gould, and I'm reading Chapter 6, A Sweet Idea. Usually when I go home with a classmate for the weekend, we do fun things, but all Holly wanted to do was work on her presents. Luckily on Saturday, her mom insisted that Holly go shopping with her. Once they were gone, and I was sure they weren't coming back for a while, I decided to take a break from my cage. I was curious about Holly's list of presents. I was especially curious about one name on the list. A name that starts with hum and ends with a Y. It didn't take me long to jiggle the lock on my door open. As I strolled across Holly's desktop, I was careful not to knock over any of the jars of glitter or paint, or to step on something sharp, like a paper clip or a pair of scissors. I could feel 4 eyes following me as I passed by Billy and Lily. "Don't mind me," I told them. "I'm just looking for the list." The fishes' mouths opened and closed. It looked as if they were talking, but there was no sound except for the bubbling water. Were they trying to tell me something? I paused to look at them, and they stared back at me and never, ever blinked. When I have adventures outside of my cage, I try to make sure no one will see me. It felt odd to have Billy and Lily staring at me, but I was almost positive they couldn't tell Holly that I'd been out of my cage. I hurried past the tank and found the list sitting between a box of watercolors and the giant book of crafts. It was a long list, so I started at the bottom and worked my way up to the top. Of course, it's not easy for a small hamster to read the huge letters humans write, but Holly's writing was neat, and I could make out the names. Just as she said, there was Mr. Fitch's name with bookmark written after it, and lanyard with Mrs. Wright's name next to it. I saw Phoebe's calendar and Rosie's carry-all, and a few things I didn't know about, such as tissue paper wreaths for some of my friends. I moved up the list a little more and saw Og's name. Next to it, Holly had written mermaid. Og was getting a mermaid for his tank? Now that was a surprise, especially because I didn't think mermaids were real. I wanted to give Og his first gift, but I didn't think I could come up with anything close to a mermaid. I was almost to the top of the list, and right above Miss Brisbane's name, I saw a great big Humphrey. I was unspeakably disappointed to see this after my name. Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. What kind of gift is that? I heard a door slam, so I scurried back to my cage. When Holly came in, she went straight to work on her presents some more while I watched. I watched her glue candy canes to a picture frame, which was a useful and yummy gift. And then she made a bookmark with the words "Reading Rocks" on it. By the time her parents told her it was time for bed, she'd checked off quite a few gifts on her list. But she hadn't crossed off mermaid, and I was pretty sure my name still had those question marks after it. Holly went to sleep right away. She must have been exhausted from working so hard. Even in the dark, I could feel Billy and Lily staring at me and opening and closing their mouths. What were they trying to tell me? I finally crawled into my sleeping hut, and after a while, I dozed off. I had a strange dream about a tiny package sitting in my cage. It had a tiny card that said, "To Humphrey from Holly." I gnawed off the ribbon and opened the box, and in it was a little carrot. I love, love, love carrots, so I nibbled off a piece. It was yummy, but to my amazement, the carrot suddenly grew bigger. Since I'm a curious hamster, I took another bite. This time, the carrot grew bigger and bigger until it was bigger than I am. And it kept on growing and growing. I had to jiggle open the lock that doesn't lock and escape before the giant carrot took over my cage, the room, and the entire world. Luckily, I woke up before that happened. My heart was pounding, but it quieted down when I realized that it was only a dream. I'd been thinking a lot about Holly's gift to me, but now I wasn't quite sure I wanted anything more than the peace and quiet of my comfy cage for the holidays. I guess Holly had finally worn herself out, because the next morning she slept and slept and slept some more. Finally, her mom and dad came in to see if she was all right. As soon as Holly woke up, she sat straight up in bed and said, "I've got to get to work." "Wait, Holly." Her mom sat on one side of the bed and her dad sat on the other. "I have to keep going or I won't finish them all," Holly cried. "We've got to talk about this," Mrs. Hanson said. "I called Mrs. Brisbane last evening to ask about gifts, and she said she'd already told you there was no gift exchange in your class." Holly moaned, "Oh, but I want everybody to like me." "Holly, you don't give presents to get friends," Mr. Hanson said. "But I want them to know how much I like them." Then it was really nice, because Holly's mom and dad both hugged her. I like to see humans hug, but if a human hugged me, it might hurt a lot. A little stroke of a finger on my back is fine with me. "You're trying to do too much, and I'm afraid your friends will feel bad because they didn't make a present for you," Mrs. Hanson said. "Did you ever think of that?" I was truly sorry to see Holly's eyes filling with tears. "She had a suggestion," Mrs. Hanson said. "She said if you wanted to make one gift for the whole class, that would be very nice, and we could donate the presents you've made to children in the hospital. Think how happy they'd be to receive them." "But what could I make? Everybody is so different. I can't give the whole class one bookmark or picture frame." "We'll figure something out," Mr. Hanson said. "Now let's have breakfast." "Pancakes?" Holly asked. Her mom and dad looked at each other and smiled. "Pancakes," they both said. Holly smiled and left the room with her parents, which left me alone to think and think and think some more. What could Holly make for the whole class? She was right when she said everybody was different. My classmates were like snowflakes. One present wouldn't fit them all. Or would it? I decided to check out Holly's great big book while the Hansons were making and eating pancakes. Maybe I could come up with a plan. I jiggled my lock that doesn't lock and hurried across the desktop. Then I saw them, Billy and Lily, swimming around with their wide open eyes staring at me. As their mouths opened and closed, I thought maybe they wanted to tell me something. I stopped in front of their tank. "Hi, Billy. Hi, Lily," I said. "My name's Humphrey." They swam. They stared. Their mouths opened and closed, but they still didn't say anything. "Well, nice chatting with you," I said. Then I hurried over to the huge book. Luckily, it was open. I'm strong for a hamster, but I might not be strong enough to open such a big book. I glanced at the pages I could see. There were instructions for making a reindeer out of a paper bag, a menorah made of sticks, and a clothespin angel. They were nice ideas, but not quite right for the whole class. It wasn't easy to turn the page on such a large book, but I found that I could wiggle my nose between the pages, push my head in first, and squeeze in the rest of me. Next, I walked toward the middle of the book, and the pages flipped over my head. I looked at more interesting gifts: a paper cup bell, a stocking made of felt, a thumbprint Santa. I was about to give up when I turned a page and saw it. The most beautiful house in the world. It was made of gingerbread, with cake frosting on the roof, a candy cane chimney, and yummy candy glued along the sides. The garden was covered with white and fluffy flakes, like snow. I think they call it coconut. I stared and stared at that little house, wishing I had one just like it. All my friends would love a little candy house like that too. Then I heard footsteps. I dashed across the desk, past Billy and Lily, and back to my cage, slamming the door behind me. I crossed my paws and waited. Sure enough, Holly went straight to her desk and sat down. "Humphrey, we didn't think of a single thing that would be nice for the whole class," she said. "What am I going to do?" "You could look at the picture book. You could look at the picture in the book," I squeaked. I knew she couldn't understand me, but I wanted to help. Holly reached her hand toward the book. "Yes! I've looked through this book 100 times, Holly said. "There's nothing there." Then she moved her hand and was about to close the book entirely. "Oh no!" I squeaked. "Please, please, please, see that little house." I closed my eyes. I couldn't stand to see her miss out on this wonderful idea. "Wait," she said. I opened my eyes. Holly hadn't closed the book. Instead, she was staring at the page with the house. "Look at this gingerbread house," she said. "Everybody would like it, don't you think?" "I sure do," I told her. She stared at the page some more. "I love to bake with Mom and Grandma. Mom could help me bake it, and I could decorate it." Holly looked happy for the first time all weekend as she scooped up the book and headed out of the room. "Mom, I just had a great idea," she shouted. It was nice to see helpful Holly smiling, even if the great idea was actually mine. Humphrey's Winter Wonderings. I wonder what it would be like to live in a house made of candy. Or better yet, a house made of carrots. Yum!